All right, welcome back. What we're going to do in this particular tutorial is we're going to show you how to do the landscape painting. So I'm going to be creating a custom landscape material. It's different than a regular material. It's got different nodes in it. And we'll show you how to, sort of best practices for going in and setting up an area that you would like to paint. So I'm starting with the same landscape that I just sculpted. I'm also downloaded some textures to use down here in the material that I'm going to create. They are out in the Google Drive. They are called T-Dirt, T-Dirt-N, which is the normal map for the dirt. I've got T-Grass and the T-Grass normal, and I have T-Rocks and a T-Rocks normal. And you can download those and import those in, and it's a great way to at least start out and understand how painting a terrain will actually work. Now, I also have out there in the Google Drive a lot more of each of those three, the dirt, grass, and rocks. There are a lot of varieties, and you can experiment with those later on. But these are three materials that work pretty well. They have the normals that go with them, so I thought this would be a great way to show you exactly how this will work. So what I'm going to do is I've got an idea of how I would like to paint this texture on here. I've got those three because what I'd like to have is I want grass to be on most of the terrain. But if you do your research, and if you're trying to create a landscape or create an image that matches a particular photograph that you've seen, you're already going to have a good idea of what it is that you need to do. In this particular case, I'm not really working from any image, but I've looked at a lot of images and I kind of understand how these things go together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay grass down on everything, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back, I'm going to paint the dirt and grass, because there's a few little patches of grass in there and some gravel. I'm going to paint those in and around on my areas of grass, so I don't have just a large area of grass. I'm going to have patches of dirt, which is the way the real world looks anyway. And then on areas that are more vertical, in this particular case, I've got a section right around in through here, and I got some other sections up here on the side of this hill. I'm going to make it look as if the side of the hill has sort of collapsed down, and you can see rocks that are the basis of those hills. And they're going to have some grass and some gravel scattered around on them. And I'm going to mix and match and kind of make it look like it all goes together. And like I said in the video on sculpting your tutorial, really it's not going to look finished and it's not going to look realistic until we get completely done. So that doesn't look like a realistic terrain now because it doesn't really have a whole lot of details in it. I'm going to be painting more details in, but it's still not going to look finished. You're really going to have to go in and take the third step on this, which is painting your assets in there using the foliage paint. So I can put grasses and trees and bushes and rocks and whatever other little assets I happen to find out there. And paint them in so it looks like a realistic terrain. All I'm doing is I am putting down the base color. Think of it as the base color for the way the terrain is going to look. And one of the ways that you can think about this is, and I'll show you a little bit more once I start painting it, but if you're out and you're walking around, and if you look at, say, the quads at Glendale, you'll see, if you're looking out across the commons area, you'll see grass areas. You see, areas of grass surrounded by concrete, and you see the grass. You don't really see any dirt, but you do see the grass. If you walk up to the grass and look straight down, you will see the dirt underneath the grass. You might see, some smaller areas of grass. You might see larger areas of dirt. But if you actually stop and look down, you're going to see dirt or things like that underneath the grass, the blades of grass. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to be putting down areas that are going to be dirt, areas that are going to be grass. There are some areas that I want to have the grass is just a texture. There are going to be some places where I'm going to actually have blades of grass or areas of assets of grass that I'm going to be putting down, and they would go down on dirt. And they don't grow on rock, they're going to grow on dirt. So I'm going to make sure that I get my area set up to do that. And I'm going to work very carefully to blend these textures all together. And you're going to do the same thing. When you start to paint, you're going to go just like you did sculpting the mountains. You're going to go slow. You can use a small brush, and you're going to be using the fall off so you can get little areas of dirt and grass and rock all mixed together. So that's kind of where we're going to go. And my OneDrive is restarting, so we'll let that go. All right, so let's create the new material using these things, and let's look at exactly how this material is done. Now I've got one already set up here. I'll pull this over and take a look at it, and it looks really complicated, and it's not. It's actually 3 textures rolled together into one. The reason it looks so complicated is I have my 3 textures up above, my rock, my dirt, and my grass, and then down below I have the normal maps for them, and they're all tied together with their own individual texture coordinates. And the thing that we're using that's a little bit different from anything we've used before is this one, which is called the layer blend. All right, that's different. We have not used one of these. And the texture coordinates over here, you'll notice they say landscape coordinates because they have to work differently. They're going to be handling the way the texture goes down on my terrain, and it's a different sort of object, so that's a little bit different. But basically we're used to using coordinates for setting up the tiling on how we want things to go, and we're going to handle them individually. We also have over here, we've turned off metallic and specular so the ground isn't shiny. I don't need roughness, I don't need emissive color, I don't need any of that stuff. Other than that, it's just a basic landscape terrain or landscape material that we're going to set up. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to close this down. I'm going to pull that thing on the side, I guess, and I'm going to create a new material. So I'm going to right click down here. Let's create a new material, and I'm going to call this one M_landscape 2 because I've already got one. I'm going to open it up, bring this back over here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the textures that I've already gotten over here. So I'm going to bring in my dirt, my grass, and my rock. Pull this back over, and we'll bring them up and drop them in. And the order I'm going to do them in is I'm going to go rock first, then I'm going to go dirt, and then I'm going to go grass. And I'm doing that order specifically because it's sort of the way I'm going to be painting. This is going to be the order in which I paint things. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to get the 3 normal maps, and I'll bring them up, and then I'm going to get them all aligned. Now normal maps, you got to make sure you get these things in the same order. They have to be in the exact same order, and you got to make sure you get the right ones, and sometimes it's hard to tell when you're looking at these things because they all look alike. So keep in mind, if you select one, it'll tell you over here on the left what it is. In this particular case, that's my dirt, that's my rocks, and rocks is what I want to go with first, so I'm going to put rocks, then I'm going to put dirt, and then I'm going to put the grass one down here. So I've got all 6 of them all lined up, and they're all ready to go. Okay. So first thing I'm going to get is I'm going to go in and I'm going to look for, we're going to be blending these textures together, and that's sort of your clue. You're going to be looking for something called a landscape layer blend. Okay, and you'll see you've got a bunch of different ones in here: layer coordinates, layer sample, layer switch, layer weight. We want landscape layer blend, and it's going to come in, and there's no way to hook it up. And the reason that there's no way to hook it up is because we haven't told it how many layers we want to blend. So if you look over here on the left hand side, what you'll see is it says layers, and it says 0 elements with a plus sign, which is going to add an element, and then a trash can, which will remove an element if you don't want it. And what we're going to do is we're going to click that 3 times because we're going to have 3 layers. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to name those layers rocks, dirt, and grass. And you'll see how it changes over here. Now, if you look back at this one, you'll notice that there's actually some other elements going on in here. So it says layer rock, layer dirt, then it says height dirt, layer grass, and height grass. What is that? What's going on? This is how Unreal blends their materials together. It uses it either using a weight class or a height class. Now we're going to use a mixture of the two. We're going to select the first one we're going to set to go one way, and then the others we're going to set to go a different way because we are going to be painting them on top of the base. So this is going to be painted, technically the rocks are going to be my base, and then the dirt, and then the grass, even though I'm going to be painting in a different order. This is kind of the way that it's going to go down when we first put it down. So my first one, my rocks up here, is going to be set to a blend type called LB Weight Blend. And if you click and hold on that, you'll see there's a couple of different blends that you've got in here. We're not using an alpha. We're not painting it to match a certain mask that we've created in Photoshop that's black and white, and white would have areas that are going to be one material and black's going to be different material. A different material is going to come through. We're not going to use that. And we're not going to use weight based off of, well, if I paint, I want to use 50% of one and 100% of the other. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to leave this one at weight because this is going to be the first one that we're going to be viewing. Preview weight right here, I'm just going to type in 1. And it's going to make it look like a rock. And you're not going to see the other two materials. If you want to see the other materials, you can. If you make all the preview weights 0.5, then you'll see this weird mishmash of all three textures all rolled together into one. But I don't really care about that. This is irrelevant. What this looks like right here is irrelevant to what I'm going to be working with anyway, because I'm actually going to be painting with layers, and I'm going to see the layers I'm painting with once I get out there. So I'm only going to worry about that first one. Dirt down here, however, I'm going to change to a height blend. And you'll notice it now adds in layer dirt and height dirt. And I'm going to do the same thing down here for the grass. I'm going to make it a height blend. And then I'm going to wire the rocks to the rocks. And I'm going to wire this down here into my base color. And you can see, now I can see my rocks over here. The layer dirt is going to get pulled into this, and layer grass is going to get pulled into that. And then for the height dirt, what we're going to do is we're actually going to use an alpha channel here. So I'm just going to pull my alpha channel up and plug my alpha channel into the height. So there really isn't anything in there, but that does have to be wired up there just so I have access to it. And you can see you're not really seeing anything else. That's just the rocks over here. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to bring it down here. And I'm going to wire this up exactly the same way. And then this is going to get wired into my normal. Okay, so now I've got this nice bumpy rock looking thing. And those are going to be my rocks. And then you can't see the grass, or you can't see the other one yet. And I think for right now, what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave this the way it is for right now. Actually, what I'll do is I'm going to add in the, I don't want metallic and I don't want specular on this one. So I am going to go in here and I'm going to add a constant set to 0 so it turns them off. And I'm going to pull those things over here. It's kind of annoying that things are shiny by default, because there are a lot of things in the world that aren't shiny. And in fact, I find most things that I model aren't shiny. When we start doing trees and plants, the bark's not shiny on a tree for the most part. The leaves might be, but the bark isn't. And so it gets kind of annoying when you have to go in and actually turn off shininess, but it's just something you get used to doing. I'm not going to put anything on roughness because I'm not getting any of that mirror image on there, so I don't really have to worry the reflectivity on that one that comes with that. And you can see you got nice lights and shadows and stuff on there, and it looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I'm not putting the coordinates in there yet because I'm really not quite sure how the coordinates are going to work. You really never know until you start painting and how things are going to look on your terrain. It just depends upon what it is you're doing. So I think at this point I'm just going to pull this off to the side here, so I'm not looking at it anymore. And I'm going to click on my terrain so that it's selected. Now, or your landscape. If you're not sure whether or not it's selected, remember you can use your World Outliner up over here, and you can actually click on it, so you can get this thing selected. And I'm going to then come down where it says landscape over here. It's asking me for the landscape material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my landscape 2, and I'm going to apply that material to it. And it has to think for a second, and you're going to get this where it says compiling shaders. You don't really run into this when you're dealing with assets. Now, we've talked about materials, and when you're creating a material and you're applying a material to something, when you load up an asset, a single asset, it loads up the model, the mesh, and it loads up the texture, and then, or the material. And then every time you duplicate it, move it around your world, it's already loaded the object once, and it's already loaded the material once. It doesn't need to load it every time you see it. The difference between an asset and a terrain or a landscape is the landscape is huge, and everything in your scene affects the landscape. When you do your lighting, you're going to have shadows, and the shadows are going to be on the landscape. Every time you do anything, it has to go through and rebuild all of those shaders. And I have 6 different textures built into one material. So it's going to take a while to do it. So every time you do something, every time you make a change, you're going to get that little window down there that says rebuilding shaders. And I think in this case it started out at 188, or certainly less than 200. And it only takes 10 or 15 seconds to do it. So there are going to be times when you go to open up a level that somebody else has done that involves a landscape, and it's going to have to rebuild the shaders, and there might be 5,000 different things that it has to do. And it might take it 15 or 20 minutes to rebuild the shaders. And then every time you do something, change something, move it, and have to rebuild it again, it's going to do the same thing, and it's going to take another 15 or 20 minutes. So it can be annoying and can get to be a hassle very quickly. That's one of the reasons why a lot of times what people will do is they'll build a landscape using assets. So they'll start with a flat plane, and then they'll go into a 3D modeling program like Max or Maya, and let's say they want those rolling hills. That you can do that in a 3D program. You can model those things, and then you can export them out and bring them in and just sort of lower them onto the ground, maybe have them go through the ground, and then that way you can simulate mountains and stuff like that. The plus side of a landscape is my textures are going to go all over that thing. The downside of using separate pieces is a texture that goes on a mountain that's stuck onto the ground is not going to blend nicely into the ground plane. So there are pluses and minuses for both, either way you want to go. But a lot of times that's what people will do. If I'm trying to do a snow environment, for example, the snow texture, you're not really going to notice a hard line where one object is embedded into another and a little hill sticks up. If I'm doing like a snowbank, you're not really going to see a transition. You don't need to see the transition between the two. It's going to look fine. But in dealing with painting grasses and stuff like that, it's really kind of helpful if you keep this thing as all one terrain and you just live with the fact that it's going to rebuild shaders every so often. All right, so you'll notice the first thing that popped up is the rock. Rock goes everywhere. You'll also notice the annoying stripes that are on this thing. And I need to talk a little bit about tiling. When you're dealing with an image that tiles, you're going to get this. And this would be a terrible solution if this was all supposed to be a giant rock field. Because you can see the repeating pattern it is a seamless image. The image has been made seamless, so it does blend together all the cracks and crevices, but there are lights and darks that repeat as you tile this thing. And one of the big no-nos is you almost never want to have your tiling extend in the same direction that you are moving. Now this is going to be a still image, and it's not all going to be rock anyway. But you're going to see we have the same problems with the other two textures too. So one of the things that we can do when we get into the material is we can actually rotate textures sideways. If that striping was going at a 45-degree angle either to the left or to the right, it wouldn't be as noticeable. You'd still see it, there's no question about it, but it wouldn't be as noticeable as it is when it's like laid out directly in front of you like this. Now I'm doing a still image. I'm not really going to be running through the environment. So, you know, you rotate something 45 degrees, you do run the possibility of your player running at a 45-degree angle and that texture stretching out in front of you, even though you took care to make sure that it wasn't visible right straight ahead. So these are things that we have to deal with. This is the beauty of dealing with a texture, material texture for landscaping, because I can paint and I can start to break up areas of repeating patterns by using the different textures. I can put, if I get a repeating grass pattern, I can go and break it up with dirt. If I get a repeating dirt pattern, I can break it up with rock, and I can break up the rock with any one of the other two. So I can go in and do it. Also, I'm looking at this way, that rock is actually a little too small for what I want. I want this area in here to probably be larger veins of rock. and some areas up and through here. And so I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to have to change the tiling on that rock so it is a little bit bigger, and it'll eliminate that striping that you see, both horizontal and vertical. All right, so it puts the rock material down first. Why does it do that? It puts the rock material down because that's the one I started out with. Okay, so I'm going to be painting these two on top of that. Now, if you're not really comfortable with it, obviously you can go in and reverse those. It would mean me having to go in and reverse my layers because I've got them named. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and leave it the way it is. And then what I like to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to paint the texture to be different. I'm just going to go ahead and we'll paint the grass down first because that's really kind of where I think I'd like to see how each of these things is going to look as I'm doing it. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select the Landscape tab. And now I'm going to select the Paint tab. And what you're going to see when you select that is you're going to get the same basic elements. You have a brush size. You have a brush fall off, which is going to handle that in through there. You have the strength of your painting. The higher the number, the closer to 1, the more it just puts down a big solid block of it, as opposed to blending it so you get a little bit of grasses and stuff coming together. And then you get the section down below that talks about your target layers. Okay, now here's a step that you have to do when you're dealing with the blends. Now remember, when we built this thing, okay, I have over here, I have a weight blend and I have height blends. Well, Unreal, sort of a bit of housekeeping that they have, is that they need to keep track of how you are blending things together. This is an automated thing. I don't know why it's something that I have to do and why it's not handled for me automatically by the program. But here's what we're going to do. We are going to go in and we're going to select the little plus sign. It says Create Layer Info for my rocks. And I'm going to select, in this particular case, it's a weight blended layer normal, because that's what I selected in my menu. Now this is going to come up. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a folder for me, and it's going to store this information. You have to have this information in there. I would recommend you not moving it. It's going to create a folder called Video Tutorial Painting Shared Assets, and it's going to create something in there called a Rocks Layer Info file. And if I go in and accidentally delete that, or if I can't find it, then my painting is all going to go away and I get to do it all over again. So don't mess with this. It's going to ask you, it's going to tell you where it's going to go, and you're just going to click OK. And you can see it's added this thing in over here. All right. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the other two. I'm going to click that, and this is a weight blended. So we'll click OK on that. And the last one down here, weight blended. And it's going to create those three things in through here. They're all named, and I'm going to then go click a Save All, and we'll go ahead and get those things saved up. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my grass down here. And if I start painting, you see it'll do this. Now don't panic, because it's like you have no control over this thing. It's just putting this giant thing down all at once. I'm just going to paint that entire terrain. Make sure I get the back side of that. Yeah, I did. Okay. And you see, I'm getting the exact same repeating pattern, although it's not quite as noticeable. But I'm still getting it, so I'm probably not gonna. I'm gonna want to go back. I'm gonna want to change that a little bit. And if I click on the dirt and click over here, I can see what that's going to do. It's going to have to rebuild that. And you can see I'm getting that. I'm also getting the same sort of a pattern. You can see it kind of blends through here. Those little black spots over there, don't panic too much about those. That's just your graphics card that is putting down all of this stuff. And it's going to do that in cases where you've got multiple textures. All right, so you can see, well, that's probably, I'm getting repeating plants, and you can see that's kind of annoying, so I'm going to want to go back and I'm going to want to change that in my grass. So this is probably a good time to, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to grass, and let's just paint down grass everywhere. Make sure my tool strength is at 100%, so I'm not mixing the two together. I'm literally wiping out whatever's there. And we'll start with that. And then I'm going to go ahead and get out of there, so I'm not in there anymore, and I'm going to go back into my texture. And I'm going to go in, and I think what I need to do is I need to change the scaling of my textures a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to type in landscape again, and I need to get the layer coordinates. And we're going to pop this up, and each one of these is going to have their own. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to duplicate that like this, because I'm going to handle each of these three things separate. Now I don't need to do 6 of them, because I can use this one for both that rock and for the normal. They're both going to be the same, so I can get them all set up. All right, now the first thing I'm going to do, if I look at this, here's what we are dealing with. And these are the areas that are really important for us, are the four elements down here: mapping scale, mapping rotation, mapping pan U, and mapping pan V. So mapping scale is going to be how big the texture is going to be. Okay. Now, we're not really doing a tiling. We're not saying repeat the pattern 10 times in each direction. We're actually going the opposite of that. We're saying instead of using 5 times in each of the direction, which makes the material 1/5 of the size, what we're going to do is we're going to scale the rocks up so they're much bigger. So in this particular case, I'm going to go in and set my scale on this one. I think I used 12 on that. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to wire that into my UVW map up here. I'm going to wire that down into the UV part of the normal map. And you can see the texture got much bigger. It's a little blurry, but I think that'll be okay, because it's just going to look like rock underneath everything else. And remember, this is not the end all. Painting the texture is not the end of your landscape. You really have to do more on top of that. All right, now the other sections that are in here, mapping rotation, and you can see that. If I go in and say, let's rotate that 10 degrees, it thinks about it for a second, and then it rotates it 10 degrees. And this is important, and you saw what happens when we go in and we look at the lines that are going off in the distance. I can come in here and I can take my mapping rotation and I can set it so it's, maybe at like 23 degrees, and it's going to rotate that thing, and it's going to make that pattern go off at an angle. And again, I've made the texture a lot bigger, so the pattern isn't going to be as noticeable. And if I rotate that thing, say 23 degrees or something like that, just a random number at an angle, then it's going to help soften up those repeating lines over and over again. The mapping pan U and mapping pan V have to do with bumping the texture left or right, or up or down. So U is going to go left or right. So you can see where these spots are right here. Let's look at that spot right there. If I go in and let's do this one 5, okay, it's moving it to the left. Okay, if I say let's make it 25, okay, it's making everything move to the left or to the right. And the other one is going to make things move up and down. So you're going to get this overall text, and it's just showing me the same thing here, but trust me, that's what it's doing. It's taking the entire texture and it's bumping it 25 units up or down. In this case, it's up. If it was minus 25, it would be down. And if it's positive number, it's to the left or to the right for a panning U. And if it's negative, it's going to the left. So you can go in and you can take these things and you can move them, because there might be times when you've got a particular element that's in your material that you'd like to expose and have that be a little bit more visible. You can go in and say, man, take that texture and bump it a little bit to the left or right. Okay. Now the next one we're going to do here is the we're going to do the dirt. Whoops. Take that, put it up there. Take this and put it down into that one. And let's just finish this off. And we'll take this and put it up in my grass. And we'll take this and we'll put it down here into that. And the way I'm going to set this one up is I'm going to do this one. I'm actually going to go in mapping scale. I'm going to be 6. And then I'm going to type a random number in here. I'll type 128 just because what the heck. Just going to want to just rotate that. I don't want to rotate it the same angle that I was rotating the other one. I'm just going to pick a different angle. This one down here, I'm going to do 5. And my mapping rotation, I'll do 271. Just again, so I have a random rotation on here. Okay, and then I'm going to pull this thing off to the side, and I'm going to save this and watch what happens to my texture here. Now it's going to have to compile the shaders again, and now I've got more stuff. Now we're up around 4 something, so we're going to have to wait for this to do this. And this is going to happen quite a bit, and it's going to make this video be a little bit longer than usual, but that's, I can probably, at some point I'll just start pausing these things so you can see what's happening. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. And we're back. All right. So now you can see I got much larger patches of grass and dirt going on right there. And I think that'll do pretty well for what I want. It might be a little bit big, but also I've changed the angle on that so it's not quite as noticeable. And I think what I'll do maybe here is go back and I'm going to take that, maybe take it down to 2. And I'm going to save it again. I'm going to have to do the same thing again. We'll save it. It might come up without having to redo the whole thing. If it starts to redo it, I'll just stop. That's better. I think that'll work pretty good. I still got lines going off in the distance, but I think by the time I put down plants and bushes and stuff, we'll break that up. Which is the other thing to remember, is that if you are getting those lines, that's a clue to tell me where I'm going to need to go back in and add some plants and bushes to try to avoid that. Now, in and around through here, we're going to have different things in there anyway, so we'll see. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just going to do that one too. I'm going to go ahead and do some more painting in here, and it's going to compile a few other shaders of things that aren't on here. I'm going to take my brush size down to be a little bit smaller. Not a little bit smaller, a lot smaller. Yeah, and I'm going to take I'm going to leave my brush fall off at about the same, about 0.5. And my tool strength, I'm going to turn this down to about 0.75. Now, the tool strength means that you have to hold the brush in place a little bit longer. It's basically painting down 75% of the original image, so it's about a 25% opacity. And that's kind of, if you want to test something out slowly, you can do that. I want to open up this area around here and make it look like rock. So I'm going to be painting that down, I think maybe 0.75. Maybe for that fall off, or I guess the opposite direction, 0.25. So I got a little less fall off. I just want a little bit of a fall off between the rock. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to start painting along and through here. Now don't panic when that happens. Just keep painting. I can see where I want to paint that rock. And I kind of want and if you're not sure, I click a lot as I'm moving it around. That will help me get the look that I'm going for. And I think maybe I'll go ahead and up that all the way. There we go. Sometimes it takes a couple seconds to catch up. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to put some rock up along this area up in here. So it's just kind of like there's some rock exposed on the side of that hill a little bit. You can see I'm also kind of taking out some of those stripes that you see. Just kind of paint over them a little bit. There we go. I'm just looking for a little bit of patches of rock that are exposed up here on the side of that hill. I'm going to switch back over here. Now I'm going to go to my dirt. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little smaller brush. Now, your brush size is determined partly by the resolution of the ground plane. So if you find that you're having trouble painting really fine areas, then you might have to go back and increase the resolution on your ground plane, your terrain, just a little bit to try to get that. But I think this is going to work pretty good for what I want to do. So what I've got here is I've got grass, and the grass has some sticks and some areas of dirt, and it goes to rock. But what I'd like to have is a bit of a transition between the two. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start painting with the dirt, and I'm going to kind of go around the base of that rock here, and it's going to go in and it's going to add in some of these rocks and dirt, and it's going to do it here on top of the grass, because I'm going to get a little bit of a transition in through here, and then I'm going to add a little bit of a transition up and through here, put some of that up and through there, and then if I go up here, you're really not going to see that too much up there, but I think maybe just add a little bit up there just so we can kind of see it. And again, remember, this is not the end all. You look at it and you go, well, that doesn't really look like I wanted to, but you know, the point of this is that I'm blending these things together to try to give myself the appearance of all of those materials all at once, and they all kind of go together. I've got some rocks right here. I'm going to be putting down grasses and plants anyway, so I don't really have to worry too much about that. And the way that it's going to work and the way that it's going to go together. Now, if you do something and you think, well, I just sort of wipe that out, I can just go back to rocks, and I'll just paint a little bit more rocks back up on top of that thing. And it takes a second, but it'll come back. And I can just work slowly back and forth until I kind of get the look that I'm going for here. And I think what I'll do is maybe go over here to my rocks, and I'll paint some rocks. Kind of continue that along and through here, and I'll paint a little more up around there. And you can, like I said, if you're working from images of terrains, make that a little bigger. If you're working with from images of terrains, you'll kind of get a sense of what those things look like, and you can see how you can go in and still my rock. You can go in and blend them together so you have the same appearance of all of that stuff going on. Right. So that's pretty good, I think, for what I've got right here. And I have some transitions, and maybe put a little bit more dirt over here, in through here. So I've got little patches. And again, I'm using this to break up those stripes, because those stripes are here, and I can go in and randomly put some things in here that'll help remove that and look pretty good. I may go back and maybe make those rocks be a little bit smaller. I think might be a good solution for that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here. I made the grass. I set the grass to be 2. I think I'm going to go in and set those little rocks maybe to be 3. And I'll click save on that and pull it off to the side. Or it's going to have to do everything again. So let me go ahead and pause it. And we're back, and you can see I've made my rocks all considerably smaller here. So I think it's doing pretty much what I wanted it to do. I think I'm going to go back up in here and take a little bit of that. A little grass back up and through here, just a little bit. Okay. I don't want any harsh transitions. That's kind of what I'm trying to avoid, is anything that looks like it's really a harsh transition from one area to another. And I'm going to maybe blend that together just a little bit. So I've got a little bit of rocks blending in, little rocks blending into that, and I think maybe come down over here and a little bit down there. All right, that's pretty good. I'm going to kind of keep to this angle. And you kind of get a sense of how this is working. You work slowly, blend your areas together. Don't try to, this is not the end all. This is not the way it's going to look when I'm done. This is going to have bushes and trees and rocks and all kinds of things added in. So this base rock area here is going to have actual rocks added into it later on, so it looks a little bit more realistic. This is meant to be, like the analogy I gave was, you look down at a lawn, from the side you see rocks, or you see blades of grass. When you look right down over the top of it, you can sometimes see the dirt underneath it. And that's kind of what I'm going for. I'm laying down that dirt texture that everything else is going to be on top of. In my case, it happens to be rock, gravel, and dirt, and some grass. So we'll come back here in the next video. What we'll do is we'll come back and we'll look at adding in our assets. We're going to go here and we're going to look at the next one up, which is the foliage painter. And we're going to then create some foliage painting. And be able to paint instances of objects out into our scene. You're going to have to download some files, so we'll talk about that when we come back.